Ready to move to the next level in your product career? I'm Shobhit from Intentional Product Manager. Join me as we discuss ways to help you stand out in your job search and your career so you can have more impact and make more money. Hey everyone, welcome to the Intentional Product Manager podcast. So with me is Ram Rajagopalan, who's a seasoned product leader, 15 plus years of experience in AI, customer experience, specialization in generative AI, which I know a lot of you want to know about, go-to-market strategy, building teams, innovation, and last gig was VP of AI products at RingCentral, where he led AI initiatives across a $2 billion portfolio and creating solutions that beat out like established competitors like Microsoft Teams and Zoom. So with that, Ram, welcome to the Intentional Product Manager podcast.
Hey, Shobhit. Nice to be here. Thank you for extending an invitation to be on your platform. I've been following your team and following your work. I think you're doing some incredible, thoughtful insights and helping other product leaders go to the next level. I'm happy to be part of this conversation, and let's hope we learn from each other.
Our listeners want to get to know you a little bit more. So give me just a bird's eye view of your career so far.
Yeah, I think you gave me, you introduced me and it covered a lot of things, but let me just give you an overview. I've been a product person for nearly 2 decades. I'm aging myself here. The last 10 years, I've been focusing on senior product roles in companies like RingCentral, Five9, Observe AI, etc., where I was leading teams to build or transforming customer experiences for other enterprises using generative AI. In many cases, kind of building 0 to 1 products and then scaling them up for multi-million-dollar growth, and focused predominantly on, I started the journey before LLMs were a thing, and in the last couple of years, and that took off and kind of shifted into more generative AI based products, again focusing on customer experiences. So that's been the last few years of my life. But I have both consumer experiences as well as B2B SaaS product leadership experience. I started my early part of my career at Yahoo and Western Digital SanDisk, where I built consumer mobile applications, and then later on pivoted into B2B SaaS. So I'm happy to, learned a lot in these years and happy to share what I've learned in my journey.
It's interesting you mentioned some of the early experiences, because I'd totally forgotten about Yahoo and focused on the recent past. I'll come back to some of those later, but let's talk about AI. So, you've had a lot of experience in bringing AI-powered products in companies that didn't really have a strong AI presence, if you will. So let's just understand how that works. Let's walk through maybe one instance. You could use an example and tell me, when you came in, what was your charter?
In my last 2 roles, both at RingCentral and at Five9, these are public companies, been around for 20, 25 years plus. And they start as traditional telecom companies, providing telecom, internet telephony services to, small and large enterprises worldwide. So very, very successful businesses, but they're trying to pivot into an AI portfolio. So the charter always has been about, can we build a new stream of revenue through AI? And that's been the ultimate charter. And in order to do that, what we need, my role has been about figuring out how does what problems do we solve using AI for customers, and how does it fit into the company's existing platform and portfolio of products so that there's a cohesive story that we are trying to build with that. And then last part of it is when you're trying to build these products as a product person, your role is not just about figuring out the roadmap, how to working with customers, etc. But it's also a transformation journey for the company, a company that is traditionally used, the sales team and marketing team, that are traditionally used to selling like telecom seats. You go to a customer, you speak to the head of IT, and you ask them how many employees are there, and you sell X number of seats. But when it comes to AI, now they have to transform the selling motion. You're speaking to a much higher order person like a CIO or a CRO, and you're trying to sell the value of AI. You're looking at conversational insights and things like that. So it's a transformation, not just within the product management portfolio, but also in the go-to-market approach. So as a product leader, your job now is is more about is a combination of building products, roadmaps, figuring out what problems you have to solve for customers, but also landing those products within your channels, your sales channels, making sure that your sales leaders, your sales team understands the value prop and they're able to communicate that to customers. So it's a dual role, like not just building products and roadmap, but also transforming the culture through which these products are being sold. Because now you're selling a little bit more sophisticated product than what was previously being sold. So that's been one of the biggest learnings, and I would say this to people who are listening to the show, is think about product management beyond releasing features or building out to a roadmap, but it's more about taking everybody in the company in a journey which will then benefit the product and the things that you're trying to do.
Absolutely. One of my former guests, Bruce McCarthy, he called it, in any product management role, you're not the product manager of the engineering team delivering features. You're the product manager of the business unit delivering business value and customer value. So 100% agree with you. And that's even more relevant given the kind of products that you've built out. So one interesting thing here is a lot of companies want to go on this AI journey, but there's so many possibilities. So how did you identify what would be the most impactful use cases for you to tackle?
It always starts with the customer and a product hypothesis, right? We, as a product person in the space, and when you're working for, let's say, for example, take an example of RingCentral, which starts selling business telephony systems, communication systems to enterprises like, your phone, video meetings or chat, etc. Now, we always start with the customer. We have a hypothesis around, we think this is a problem that might be persistent and we want to go talk to the customers and validate the problem. So we did a lot of that, but, more often than not, many product people will understand this, that you're in, it's a high pressure job, right? You are always thinking about what your competitors are doing. And many times we are forced to make some actions because, your sales leader or somebody in the company is saying that we need to do what your competition is doing without actually uncovering the real reason for building something. So that's that's often a challenge for many product people. But in this case, at RingCentral, one of the things that we kind of did was at that time, many of our competitors like Microsoft, Zoom, etc., were providing things like transcription services for phones. Like if you're making a phone call or you're in a meeting, you see live transcriptions. We felt at the time that transcriptions are important, but we needed to know what do customers do with these transcripts. So we started talking to customers. We had a customer advisory board. We went and reached out to them. We soon uncovered that, there's much more than transcripts. Like people, oftentimes when you're in a meeting like this, like what you and I have, we want to capture the notes. We want to capture the action items. We want to follow up, create, understand what are the follow-up actions that are happening between the meeting. And you want the system to do all of this for you so that you can pay attention to these people that you're speaking with. So we then built an AI assistant, which did all of that and just not only did transcription of calls, but we also did things like automated note-taking, identifying action items, and then creating even follow-up emails based on the conversation of the call. So that became much more holistic. And that was an example of how we went from, hey, can we do what competition A, B, or C is doing, to thinking about what exactly the customer wants, what are the customer problems, and bringing together a more holistic system. In fact, when we did that, it resonated really well. We showed some design mocks to the customers, our sales teams, etc. And we even presented this to at Enterprise Connect. We revealed the product, and that led us to winning the RingCentral in 2024, won the Best of Enterprise Connect, beating competition like Microsoft, because we were able to build much more compelling use cases using AI. And that's a way to kind of, every product manager somewhat knows this, but oftentimes we are under the pressure because, we want to catch up with the competition, or we have pressure from the organization that we are supporting. So it's important to kind of balance the pressure, but still do the right thing for the company and the product and your customers.
kudos to you for being like so customer driven. You start with a hypothesis that the competitor is doing something right, but then actually go deep and understand the use cases. So let's talk about some of the other factors here. So even convincing all the stakeholders, getting approvals, figuring out pricing, those are challenges. So how did you work through those?
These sometimes become even more of a challenge when you're trying to affect change in a larger company where you're used to the teams are used to selling on building products in a certain way. So like I said, we started with a hypothesis, then we started validating it with customers. We started building some prototypes with customers. Once we started seeing traction, we did, usability studies. We showed it to a bunch of key customers. We showed it to analysts. When, then you got a sense of that we are going in the right direction. At that point, what happens is that's when we started building the actual business case, the P&Ls for this. So we started putting some hypotheses around what can be the attach rate, what can be a potential baseline pricing, and we also start measuring the cost of goods to build the product. And we start taking into effect what could be the willingness to pay. We start getting talk to customers. We start building the kind of broad, as a PM, we kind of drive this consensus between different between different leaders within the company, like the marketing team, the pricing team, the go-to-market sales and channel team. And we start showing the outline of the business case, which kind of identifies the target segment, the persona that we are going after. And we start validating the numbers that we have taken into account, our initial assumptions in terms of what will be the actual attach rate, given that we are getting some real data from the actual sales and account executives who can tell us what can be likelihood of a customer purchasing something like this. And we start building that business case. Now, in many companies, in smaller companies, product managers and product leaders sometimes own the responsibility of naming the product and fixing the price on the product. But when you're working with a larger matrix org, this is a shared responsibility. Product teams are responsible. They influence that decision, but it comes to the alignment between the sales leadership, marketing leadership, engineering leadership in terms of the cost and the actual pricing. So the PMs are responsible for herding this team and making sure that we come to a consensus. In Ring Central, for example, some of these decisions are made at C-level. So as a product leader, I'm expected to present the whole entire analysis, the cost, the projections, the sales margins, etc., to the C staff and get the final buy-in. But that's almost like the last step, but you need to get internal alignment with all the key stakeholders. And we start with a very mathematical, analytical, we call it P times Q math in price versus quantity. And we put the projection out and we get actual data from sales and marketing in terms of what could be a projected estimate, demand gen investments that are needed, how much R&D is needed, and how much could we attach ourselves to existing products, etc. So this kind of defines the framework. And then we get, consensus and alignment with different stakeholders, and finally get the executive sign-off. And this can be, again, for a lot of product leaders, this is much more than just working with engineering and design to build a product. It requires us to drive this towards completion so that we can launch the product. Many times in doing so, you have to kind of take into account many other things. And we can talk about that in a bit. Like, for example, how do you work with legal data privacy teams to make sure that, you are doing the right thing in terms of how you're setting up your AI models and privacy, data privacy are taken into account, because that can also make or break a product launch.
That's very insightful. And again, it seems like a much broader view is needed, as you had mentioned before. So I'm curious, we see a lot of that in many products, but I'm also curious what's unique to building AI products. There are like considerations or things that you would take into account that you might not have had it not been anything to do with AI.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that, I made some of these mistakes myself. Like when we start, especially with respect to AI, it's a very sensitive topic in terms of the data, especially when you're handling customer data. How much of that customer data is used to enrich your models? How much of it is used to train your models and improve that efficiency? And sometimes, even though you might provide a kick-ass solution for a customer problem, but if the way in which customer data is handled is not transparent and you don't get the buy-ins upfront, it doesn't matter how good your solution is. Customers may not be willing to go forward with it. So it's important right at the beginning to be transparent with your customers in terms of what data are you collecting, where is it stored, how much of it is retained, and how much are you sharing with third-party providers. For example, if you're choosing, and many companies these days are using, foundational models from, let's say, OpenAI or Microsoft Azure or AWS Bedrock, it's important to choose the right partner, a partner who's available and supportive in multiple languages. Like when you're working with RingCentral, which is a global company, you're not only serving customers who are speaking English in the US, but also Spanish in the US. 40% of the conversations in US are Spanish or French Canadian. Or if you're going to global regions in the EU, you want to have the ability to, release your products in those regions. So you want to choose a partner who has, adequate data residency compliances in not just in the US, but also globally in other regions. So it's important to choose right foundational partners who can scale with you globally. And if you don't think through those at the beginning, you might end up in a dead-end situation. So you need to pick the right partner who can scale with you for different languages, different modalities as you grow your product. That's number one. And number two, I think you need to be very transparent with your customers. Like if you're choosing a specific processor for the data for AI models, you want to be very transparent with your customer in terms of how much data is retained, how long are you going to retain that data, is there any personally identifiable information that could come through the data that their customer is sharing with you, and how much of that is going to be shared with third parties, how much are you going to scrub out PII, personal identifier information, before sharing it? What are your policies? You need to be very upfront about this. And this is part of your solution proposal with your customers. Is not just how this product solves the problem, but in terms of how are you partnering with other stakeholders in this solution supply chain to come up with the problem, come up with a solution. So you need to think through some of these things, and having that transparency with the customers is critical. And last but not least, I think the ways in which I've kind of guided my team is when we start, defining the product, when you're defining the pricing, the business case, it's important we partner with the legal and data privacy teams within the company to make sure that we are compliant with all the local laws. For example, if you're serving healthcare customers, you need to be HIPAA compliant on day one. If not, you cannot serve that market, and that impacts your business model. So you need to be compliant. You need to be aware of those limitations as you're building the product, and it impacts your pricing, go-to-market approach as well.
A lot of things to take into account that you might not otherwise. I'll mention a couple of interesting things here. So back in the day, when I was at one of the first few startups, I was building a similar lead scoring model. And actually one of our first customers was RingCentral back then. And they were the same thing that, hey, if you're going to build your models based on my data, then sell it to my competitor and they get all the benefit of it from day one, it's just not going to work. So we had to do very similar things on being cognizant of all these things.
Transparency with customers is always the best policy, and you don't want to surprise them with, and particularly with respect to currently, there's a lot of sensitivity around, hey, are you using my data to train your model? So you need to be able to answer those questions adequately when you're speaking with your customers. So it's important that you understand that when you set up your partnerships with whoever you're setting up partnership, whether it's Google, Amazon, or OpenAI, as a PM, you need to be aware of what does the data pipeline looks like, what information is shared, so that you can be articulate with your own customers about that. So it's important as a PM to know some of those aspects as well.
When you think of, you mentioned different partners and other things, how do you think of where do you partner versus you build tech yourself?
Yeah, it's another great question. In fact, when I initially took up the role at RingCentral, we kind of dabbled these questions, and we kind of kept thinking about those questions continuously throughout my tenure there, in terms of buy versus build versus partner, particularly with respect to AI. My my thoughts on this, and it's my opinion, was, and this was, early 2023, when OpenAI was just coming out with their large language models, and a few other players like Anthropic were coming out with their large language models, etc. We were kind of not sure which use cases are going to resonate well with customers, and should we build our own language models, or should we leverage what is available in the market? And if you're leveraging something available in the market, what is going to be our differentiation? What is going to be the moat, etc. Ultimately, I think in the current space, I think it's important to understand or find the product market fit first. So I took the notion that let's leverage what is available out there in the market to see if we can build, like, for example, an AI assistant for capturing notes during a meeting, for example, and see if that is something that the market is willing to pay. Are we able to monetize that either directly or indirectly through, product differentiation or reducing churn? If you're able to identify these use cases, that will be the number one priority. And then, whether should we build it on ourselves, should we invest into the R&D to build our own language models, or how do we, reduce the cost of goods? That's going to be the second level problem. But the first problem is to find the product market fit. So that was one of the goals, was to, that was a framework that we used when we kind of took some decisions here, where in some places where we felt we could build our products using technologies from, foundational models from Microsoft or OpenAI or Amazon, and we could put some products out in the market much faster, see where the customers' reactions are, and then we can double down on investing more into optimizing cost. In some places where, we felt the market was fairly crowded with a lot of players, and we felt that if the use cases were complex and we couldn't get a product within 12 or 16 months, it was much better to partner first in those areas and get to understand customer needs and pain points through partnership, reselling partnership products. So we kind of thought through this in terms of where we could be more effective in short term, and where I think we could enable our sales team to be more successful by partnering with an ecosystem to resell their products. And we kind of found the balance between those two in a way that where we could continue to build a technical moat for long-term sustainability, but at the same time help the sales team be more short-term focused in terms of building a pipeline for generating more revenues down the line. So that's what we did.
Now, I'm curious about one more thing. So last few years, you mentioned, have been all in B2B enterprise tech, but you started your career, spent a lot of time on consumer products as well. How did some of the experiences in consumer products affect product management in B2B for you?
It took me a while to kind of get used to this notion. When you're building, I was a consumer PM at Yahoo. I was building mobile Yahoo search on mobile Yahoo Answers. And, as a PM, you release your product, you put it up in the App Store, and consumers directly consume it from that point. So you have a direct line of sight with your end users in a B2C context. Whereas in a B2B context, it's not always like that, because you build a product, but it's up to, oftentimes there's a services team that goes and delivers that product to the end user, and they have to customize it. Sometimes the user experience might change, and the way a team consumes the product is very different than the way you thought about it when you were building the product. And also there could be a time lag between the time you release it to the time the customers and the end users start using it. Sometimes it could be as long as 12 months or 18 months before the end user starts using it. So you have to understand, because when there's, as a PM, you want to get feedback. You want to know how the product is being used. You want to measure the utilization metrics so that you can improve the product better. So you have to take into account some of these challenges when you're going from a B2C to B2B. But the things that I learned that came in very much handy for me from transitioning from B2C to B2B was when you are in B2C world, you spend a lot of time kind of going through the data. You're looking at onboarding metrics. You're looking at PLG metrics. You're looking at daily usage stats. That kind of builds you a muscle, a discipline that sometimes I could be better PM compared to my other peers who just grew up in the B2B land. So I could be much more effective. And also when it comes to usability, customer having a point of view in terms of what designs would work and what are some implications that you should take into account between, when you're thinking about desktop interfaces, mobile interfaces, etc. I was able to kind of understand those challenges right away. And I could plan for I could anticipate some challenges in terms of putting forward certain designs in front of customers much more sooner than somebody who just grew up in the B2B space. So I felt I got lucky kind of learning from building my skills in the B2C space and then taking it over to B2B. But ultimately, I would say always focus on the customer problem rather than, it's always you get carried away with the heat of the situation to just copy what your competition is doing.
I don't see enough people who've crossed this that many times. It's sort of start in one lane and stay in that. And there's so much benefit from going back and forth.
Yeah, it's also not easy to change that mindset. I took a very conscious decision because I was getting to a place where it was, I felt a little bit bored and repetitive in the B2C space. And I wanted to do something, go back to a learning mode. And I made a conscious decision to change. And it worked out well looking back. But, you have to be prepared to unlearn a few things as you transition from one, B2C to B2B. And even today, I feel there is a lot more, and especially generative AI is changing almost every week. As a PM, it's hard to keep up. Things that I think are something that will help. And I think, a few years ago, when you're hiring for PMs, you can see descriptions like, you need to know SQL, you need to know how to write SQL queries, etc., to be more effective in your job. But going forward, I think that will shift. And then you will see requirements coming through in terms of prompt engineering. You need to be good at writing prompts, using prompt engineering to understand how you're affecting the user experience of your product is going to be critical. So investing in learning some of the basics of prompts, using tools. I think there's a Reddit forum on prompt engineering. I advise people to go check it out. There's a lot of tools that are mentioned there, and new tools are coming up every day. I've used things like Diffie, etc., to kind of understand the effects of prompts, and also pay attention to overall measuring the accuracy of AI. So these are two things that I think is going to be a hot topic down the road for PM and PM leaders to pay close attention to.
Let's say you're a PM, you're established PM, but you've never really worked in AI. It's something new, and now you're like, oh, what's going to happen? Is it going to take my job away? All these things. What would be your advice for those folks to sort of transition into the new world, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, purely speaking, if you're a PM who's not working on core AI tech, right? For example, me and my team, we worked on core. We were kind of working on AI products for other customers. So we were day in and day out working on models and prompts and so on and so forth. But if you're a PM who's not in that space directly, I think, as a consumer, I would say definitely subscribe to one of these, OpenAI, ChatGPT, or one of, Gemini is somewhat free. Start leveraging that in your day-to-day PM tasks. For example, you're writing a PRD and you want to know how to exactly specify a requirement. Now you can leverage OpenAI to write better PRDs. Similarly, if you are trying to do competitive research, you can definitely use and provide the right prompt to ChatGPT or Gemini to do a much more elegant way of doing competitive research. Or let's say, for example, you are trying to write a SQL query, but you don't know where to start. Now you can use ChatGPT to give you some hints and write a better SQL query than what you have done so far. So there are ways in which you can leverage the tools to make your life a lot simpler, a lot easier. I think that's the way. It's not going to be, is AI going to replace my job? It's not going to be that. I think someone who's using AI tools will soon replace your job if you don't use it. That's the way to see it. I personally use it I started using it almost on a daily basis to be a better product leader, to be a better PM. And I think, I'm sure everybody's already doing that. Smart PMs are already on board in doing some of this. But if somebody's curious, you can use ChatGPT to learn more about ChatGPT.
It seems a lot of what you're saying is actually become a power user first, and then from there you get deeper into prompt engineering and you sort of make your way in. Yeah,
prompt engineering can be, depends on what type of PM you are, but definitely you can definitely use or fine tune your prompts if you are trying to, for example, you're writing, you're building let's say you're building an email app. And you want to know how to rephrase an email. What are the different ways in which the prompts could be used to rephrase an email? How are you changing the input parameters to affect the output? And what is the relationship between input and output? That's something that I think you could start spending some time to understand, so that you can then provide better requirements to your engineers, and you can make their lives a little bit simpler if you do. And you'll get enormous respect from your engineering folks when PMs do additional due diligence before handing out the requirements to them. So something that I think will go a long way.
I recently had my son explain in giant detail why Gemini is so good and how it does things and all the benefits. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to post this, record it. And he's 11 now. So he's almost using it from the start. So he's able to explain so many things in such a good way that I'm like, cool. Sometimes we just need to adapt to thinking in those new ways.
Yeah, absolutely. We are at inception point in terms of, some ways in many of us fear that all these tools might might move away the younger generation from actually doing the work. But I feel, I think going back, when we were in school, right? I think I remember, calculators were just coming out, right? We were using calculators. I still remember using logarithmic tables, and then we started using calculators. Just because, calculators came up, it doesn't mean that your engineering or STEM curriculum got easier. It just got you were using tools much more effectively, more productively, and I think one of the things that I think we often underestimate is that as these tools come into mainstream, the complexity of our day-to-day lives will also increase, and I think the problems, few years ago nobody expected an automated response for an inquiry, right? When you call a number, you were ready to be on hold for half an hour, 60 minutes, etc. Now that those expectations are unrealistic, you expect an immediate response. So that's an example of how complexities have changed, and underlying technology will scale along with that, and new complex problems will come up for us to be solved, and there'll always be that catching up to do between technology and the problems of the society. So I do feel I'm optimistic that these tools will build better engineers and better PMs in the future. But you need to know how to use these tools to be proficient.
Ram, on that note, thank you so much for appearing on the podcast. How do people follow you and get to know you?
Thank you again, Shobhit. From the questions that you ask, I can tell that you've been a PM yourself. So I'm on LinkedIn. Of course, you can always reach out to me via LinkedIn. That's the best way to follow or chat with me. I'm open to advising startups, new founders on the, when I get time. So please feel free to reach out. And if you're a fellow PM and you have a challenge at work, I'm happy to be a sounding board. A PM will know the pain of another PM. So I'm definitely here to help. Again, thank you for having me on your pod. Looking forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hey, be sure to check out our website at intentionalproductmanager.com to see how you can level up in your career.